The night Lucas Ward walked back through the iron gates of the family estate, everyone in Western Harbour thought they were seeing a ghost. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. The Ward estate sat on a hill above the Atlantic, a sprawling glass and stone mansion that looked more like a luxury hotel than a family home. On clear days, the twin infinity pools seemed to spill straight into the ocean. Tonight, though, the sky was heavy, the wind pushing salt and fog up the cliffside, as if the sea itself wanted to watch what was about to happen. Inside, under soft chandelier light, Ethan Ward stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, drink in hand, staring at his own reflection. 36 years old, tall, sharp-featured, brown hair perfectly styled, light beard trimmed to perfection. He looked exactly like his brother had the last time anyone saw him. That was the problem. Every mirror had been a reminder that somewhere out there, a man with his face had chosen to vanish. For 10 years, Lucas had been a question no one could answer. One day, he was closing a deal for one of the family's real estate funds. The next, he was gone. No calls, no notes, no credit card charges, nothing. Police searches, private investigators, even quiet money slipped to people who specialized in finding the unfindable. None of it mattered. Lucas Ward had disappeared like he'd stepped off the edge of the world. The Ward fortune didn't crumble without him. If anything, it grew. Ethan took over more of the business with their father, Charles, and later alone. After the heart attack that took Charles 3 years ago, Ethan was the twin who stayed, the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who never missed a board meeting, a tax filing, or a charity gala. He used to tell himself that's why people trusted him, but even after 10 years, there were always whispers. Maybe Lucas knew something. Maybe he took something. Maybe he's the one who should have inherited more. Ethan pretended not to hear, yet he couldn't silence the thought that kept him awake most nights. What if he walks through the door tomorrow? Not because he feared for the money, because he didn't know who his brother would be after vanishing like that. The security gate buzzed faintly on the console by the front entrance, followed by the low rumble of tires on gravel. Ethan turned, glanced at the digital display, and frowned. A black SUV, unregistered in their system, was easing its way up the long, tree-lined driveway. "Are you expecting someone?" Maria, the house manager, asked from behind him, clutching a tablet to her chest. "No," Ethan said. "But let them in." He told himself it was just a late lawyer, or someone from the investment firm, maybe a neighbor with some meaningless complaint. He didn't move until he saw the SUV stop under the porte-cochere and a man step out into the low, yellow wash of the exterior lights. At first, Ethan didn't breathe. Same height, same build. The distinctive set of the shoulders, dark coat, open at the front, revealed a white shirt and a slim black tie. The wind pushed brown hair off the man's forehead, the same shade as Ethan's, the same light beard outlining a familiar jawline. For a heartbeat, Ethan thought he was staring at a reflection that had learned how to walk outside the glass. The front door opened, controlled by the staff from the inside. The man walked in as if he owned every square inch of marble beneath his polished shoes. His eyes, light hazel, sharp, assessing, swept across the foyer, taking in the art, the staircase, the hallway, and finally, Ethan. "Hello, brother," Lucas Ward said, his voice lower, colder than Ethan remembered. "Did you miss me?" Maria gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. One of the younger staff whispered, "Meu Deus," under her breath, crossing herself as if she'd seen the dead rise. For a moment, the house seemed to hold its breath. Ethan had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. Tears, yelling, curses, maybe even a punch thrown, just to prove they were still human. In the end, what came out of his mouth was flat, controlled, the way he spoke in boardrooms when millions of dollars were at stake. "You're 10 years late," Ethan said. Lucas smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only calculation. He slipped off his coat, revealing an immaculate tailored suit that fit him like it had been made by someone with a waiting list of billionaires. On his wrist, a watch Ethan recognized immediately, not by model, but by price. It was the kind of thing old money considered too loud and new money wore like a trophy. "Traffic," Lucas said. "You know how it is." "Where have you been?" Ethan asked. The words tasted like acid. "You disappeared. We thought you were dead." "Nobody really thought that," Lucas replied, eyes gliding over a painting that had cost more than most people's homes. "You're too smart for that, Ethan. You know people like me don't just die. We adapt." He walked further into the foyer, running his fingers casually along the banister of the sweeping staircase, like he was checking if the house had aged in his absence. His presence changed the air, charged it. The staff, used to the calm predictability of Ethan's routines, lingered at the edges, pretending to be busy, watching every move. Ethan noticed other details now. The small scar along Lucas's jaw that hadn't been there before. The faint, white line at his temple. The way he scanned exits without turning his head. This wasn't the reckless, charming twin who used to show up late to family dinners with excuses and a new business idea. This man looked like someone who had walked into rooms where life was cheap and walked out richer. "You look good," Ethan forced himself to say. "I look expensive," Lucas corrected him lightly. "There's a difference." "Where did the money come from?" Ethan asked, unable to hide the edge in his voice. "Because last time I checked, you left without a cent from this house." Lucas's gaze finally locked on his, sharp as broken glass. For a second, Ethan saw something there, amusement, maybe, or a warning. "There are other ways to get rich," Lucas said. "Faster ways, riskier ways." The implication hung between them. Ethan knew enough about the world to understand that not all fortunes were clean. The ward money had its shadows, but they were old shadows, decades back, buried under legal structures and generational distance. Whatever Lucas had done in the last 10 years felt closer, raw. "Dad died," Ethan said, because it felt impossible to stand there and not say it. 3 years ago, he left. He left everything to me. You were declared legally missing." Lucas's smile faded, just a fraction. "I heard." "How?" Ethan asked. Lucas tilted his head, studying him. "You really think I wasn't watching?" Ethan's skin prickled. For 10 years, one twin had disappeared, but that didn't mean he'd been gone. The sitting room off the foyer had always been Charles Ward's favorite, a room of dark wood, leather armchairs, and a stone fireplace that crackled in winter. Tonight, Ethan led Lucas there because some part of him needed the weight of that room. It was where deals had been made, contracts signed, arguments settled. If ghosts existed, they would listen from these walls. "You remember this place?" Ethan asked, as he closed the doors behind them. Lucas didn't answer right away. He walked slowly across the rug, eyes tracing the old framed photos on the mantel. Vacations in Aspen, summers in the Hamptons. That one awkward teenage shot where both twins wore identical suits and identical forced smiles for a prep school graduation. His fingers brushed the edge of one silver frame. A younger Lucas, 25, leaning against a car he hadn't paid for, grinning like he could talk his way out of anything. "I remember," he said quietly. "I also remember the last conversation I had in here." Ethan didn't need to ask which one. 10 years earlier, their father had stood in this room and told Lucas he was cutting him off. No more trust fund advances, no more bailing out his projects, no more rescue from the aftermath of his impulsive decisions. "You have the brains, Lucas, but you don't have the discipline," Charles had said. "You're going to ruin us, and I won't let that happen." Lucas had walked out that night with nothing, no money, no car, no promise of anything waiting for him. By morning, he was gone. Sit, Ethan said, motioning to one of the leather chairs. Lucas sat, crossing his legs, perfectly composed. Ethan remained standing a moment longer, trying to figure out why his own house suddenly felt like neutral ground, like neither of them fully owned the space. "So," Ethan began, taking the chair across from him, resting his elbows on the arms, "you've been watching. You knew Dad died. You knew about the will. You knew you'd been declared legally dead." "Not dead," Lucas corrected softly. "Missing. It was a formality. A court needed a definition." "And you chose that one?" Lucas asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I didn't choose anything. The lawyers did what they had to do. The estate couldn't sit frozen forever while we waited for you to decide if you were ever going to call." Lucas watched him with an unreadable expression. "Did you look for me?" Ethan hesitated, and in that silence, Lucas's faint smile returned, as if the answer didn't matter, or as if he already knew it. "We hired investigators," Ethan said finally. "For years. Dad never admitted it, but he did. I did. They found nothing. No bank accounts, no addresses, no aliases. You disappeared too cleanly to be an accident. Maybe you hired the wrong people," Lucas said. "The ones I met were better." There it was again, that edge, a suggestion of another world, operating behind the polished glass of the Ward Empire. A world where people with money and desperation met in dim rooms and traded favors that couldn't be written down. "Fine," Ethan said. "So where were you? What did you do that made all this possible?" He nodded at the watch, the suit, the quiet confidence. "You look like you walked out of a hedge fund commercial." "I did some investing," Lucas replied. "In what?" "People," Lucas said. Ethan blinked. "That's not an answer." Lucas leaned back, folding his hands. "It's the only one you're going to get tonight." Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. From beyond the door, Ethan could hear the muted sounds of the staff pretending nothing was happening. Dishes clinking in the kitchen, footsteps down the hall, a vacuum humming faintly. "You can't just come back after 10 years and expect things to be how you left them," Ethan said. "This house, the company, the accounts, everything is structured around the reality that you were gone." Lucas's gaze flicked to the window, where the dark Atlantic pressed against the glass beyond the cliff. "I don't expect anything to be how I left it," he said. "In fact, I'd be disappointed if it were. The world rewards people who move forward." "Good," Ethan said, "because I did." Lucas's eyes snapped back to him. There was almost a hint of admiration there. Almost. "So tell me," Lucas said, "how is our empire?" "It's not ours," Ethan said sharply. "Legally, it's mine." Lucas's lips parted in a slow, dangerous smile. "Legally? That's an interesting word, coming from someone whose entire net worth sits on top of a foundation poured by lawyers and loopholes." Ethan felt his pulse tick up. "What are you talking about?" Lucas uncrossed his legs and leaned forward. "You really think Dad's will is as straightforward as your attorneys made it seem? You think a man like Charles Ward didn't anticipate the possibility that his irresponsible son might come back with more money and more power than he ever expected?" He reached into his coat, and for a split second, Ethan stiffened. Lucas noticed and smirked before pulling out a folded, creased document, edges worn, paper softened by years of being handled. "I spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe," Lucas said calmly. "Places where paper is still king, where people keep things hidden in drawers no one's opened in decades. You'd be amazed what surfaces when you know who to pay." He laid the document on the coffee table between them. Ethan stared at it but didn't touch it. "What is that?" "An earlier version of Dad's will," Lucas said. "The one that didn't make it to probate. The one your lawyers never showed you. The one that assumes 2 sons, not 1. "You're lying," Ethan said, but his voice didn't carry the weight he wanted it to. "Maybe," Lucas said. "Maybe not, But the people I've been working with, they're very good at making old documents matter again. Courts are flexible, especially when you introduce questions. Questions like, was the original will destroyed, coerced, replaced? You disappeared. Ethan's control finally cracked. You walked out, Lucas. You abandoned this family. You abandoned Dad. You abandoned me. And now you're going to walk back in and claim you're the victim. Lucas's face hardened. The room went colder. You think I left because I wanted to? He asked quietly. Ethan opened his mouth, then shut it. Then why? He asked. Barely more than a whisper. Lucas looked at him, and for the first time, the mask slipped. Just for a second, there was something raw in his eyes, hurt, anger, something darker underneath. Because staying, he said slowly, would have gotten me killed. The words landed like a punch. Ethan stared at him, half expecting a smirk, a laugh, some sign that it was a joke. It didn't come. What are you talking about? Ethan asked. Lucas's gaze drifted toward the door, as if checking no one else was listening. You really didn't know, he murmured. Maybe you weren't part of it after all. Part of what? Lucas rose to his feet, moving toward the fireplace, the flickering light cutting sharp shadows across his face. You're not the only one who's been busy these last 10 years, Ethan. I've been tracing money, calls, contacts. I've been following the trail that started in this house and ended in places Dad never wanted you to know about. He turned back to Ethan, eyes colder now. There are people who don't like that I'm still alive, people who thought this family's arrangements died with Charles Ward. They were wrong. He slipped his hands into his pockets, as if he'd just made a perfectly casual remark about the weather. And now that I'm back, he added, they're going to start paying attention again. Ethan swallowed, suddenly aware of every window, every shadow outside. But what came next, the narrator would have said if someone were watching from a distance, changed everything. Ethan didn't realize his hands were shaking until he reached for his drink, and the ice clinked louder than it should have. The words would have gotten me killed kept replaying in his head like an echo trapped between the walls. You're being dramatic, he said, but it came out softer than he meant. Who would want you dead? You were the screw-up son, remember? Not the criminal. Lucas studied him, as if trying to measure how much truth Ethan could handle before something broke. You think Dad's money came from zoning and land development alone? Lucas asked. Come on, Ethan. You're not that naive. I know the business, Ethan snapped. I've spent a decade cleaning it, tightening it, making sure everything is compliant. Whatever he did before, whatever gray areas he played in, that's over. Lucas's eyes glinted. You can't clean a foundation that's cracked. You can only build higher and pray it doesn't collapse. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but there was a knock at the door, sharp, professional. Mr. Ward? Maria's voice came through. I'm sorry to interrupt. Ms. Collins is here. Ethan exhaled in relief, a tether back to the world he understood. Send her to the study, he said. Then, to Lucas, I have a call with the West Shore Fund in 10 minutes. We'll finish this later. Lucas arched an eyebrow. You're really going to pretend this is just a normal night? Someone has to, Ethan replied, standing. You can stay in the East guest room. We'll talk about logistics in the morning. Lucas rose too, stepping closer. Close enough that Ethan could see the faint lines at the corners of his brother's eyes, evidence of years spent squinting into harsh sun, or maybe watching his back. Here's what you need to understand, Lucas said quietly. This isn't just a family reunion. I didn't come back for the view or nostalgia. I came back because your name is on things you don't know exist. Offshore entities, shell companies, accounts nobody ever declared. Ethan frowned. That's not possible. I oversee every account. You oversee the ones they showed you, Lucas cut in. Dad trusted you with the visible empire. He trusted other people with the parts that needed to disappear. Other people like who? Lucas hesitated, then dropped a name that made the air feel thinner. Gideon Hale. Ethan's stomach flipped. Hale was a legend in whispers. The kind of consultant who handled problems money alone couldn't fix. No official title, no photos. Just a name that surfaced in rumors around hostile takeovers and companies that conveniently folded right before federal investigations. That's just a story, Ethan said, but his voice was all wrong, and Lucas heard it. Gideon is not a story, Lucas replied. He's the reason I left. Dad brought him in when we were 26, behind your back, behind mine. Then he made a mistake. What mistake? Dad thought he could negotiate, Lucas said. But men like Gideon don't negotiate. They choose a leverage point and squeeze. That leverage was me. Ethan stared at him. Why you? Because I was the visible weakness, Lucas said simply. The son with debt, the son with favors owed, the son who could be pushed into signing things he shouldn't. He moved closer to the fire, the flames painting his face in flickering orange. I was given a choice: help them move money quietly through our properties and shell companies, or watch you become their leverage instead. The room seemed to tilt. Ethan grabbed the back of his chair. No one ever approached me, he said. That's because I left, Lucas replied. I vanished. I became useless to them. A ghost, harder to threaten from a distance. But walking away from Gideon Hale's people isn't clean. They don't like loose ends. What did you do? Ethan whispered. Lucas looked at him for a long moment. Things I'm not proud of, he said. But I learned. I watched. I followed the trails they never thought I'd understand. And that's when I realized something. What? They didn't just use our name, Lucas said. They used yours. A chill laced down Ethan's spine. Before he could answer, the doors opened and a woman stepped in. Early 30s, sharp navy suit, dark hair pulled into a low, precise bun. Emily Collins, corporate attorney, crisis manager, and the person Ethan trusted most outside the bloodline. Her confident stride faltered for the first time since he'd known her when she saw the man standing by the fireplace. Oh my God, she breathed. Ethan, is that? Lucas turned, the charm turning on like a switch. Lucas Ward, he said, extending his hand. The prodigal brother. I've heard lawyers don't like surprises, so you're having a rough night. Emily glanced at Ethan, searching his face for some explanation that made sense. She didn't find one. I thought you were... She stopped herself, catching the word before it escaped. Dead hung silently in the air between them anyway. I mean, there was a death certificate. Yeah, I heard about that paperwork problem, Lucas said lightly. We'll have to fix it. Ethan stepped between them slightly, instinctively positioning himself like a buffer. Emily, this is exactly what it looks like. He showed up at the gate an hour ago. Says he has an earlier version of my father's will and information about offshore accounts. Emily's professional mask slipped back into place with impressive speed. She was good. That's why Ethan had brought her in years ago. First thing, she said calmly, we're going to secure that document you mentioned. Then we're going to verify it. Then we're going to talk about legal exposure for everyone in this room. Lucas's smile didn't reach his eyes. I like her, he said. She thinks order still means something. Emily turned to him. Mr. Ward, with respect, showing up after 10 years with a mysterious will and hints about illegal activity is not exactly how you build trust with counsel. Good thing I'm not here to build trust, Lucas replied. I'm here to build leverage. Emily's jaw tightened. Leverage against who? Lucas's gaze moved between her and Ethan. That depends on who decides to stand with me, he said, and who pretends I don't exist. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Ethan forced himself to focus, to pull everything back to something tangible. "Emily, can we be sued? If this document is real, if there are accounts, if my signature is on things—" "Slow down," she said. "We don't know anything for certain yet. And until we do, nobody says another word about offshore structures, shadow accounts or mysterious consultants. Not on the phone, not over email, not in texts." She looked at Lucas. "You said people might start paying attention now that you're back. How confident are you that they don't already know you're here?" Lucas hesitated. "Confident enough," he said. Emily didn't like that answer. It showed in the way her shoulders stiffened. "Because if they do," she continued, "then this house, this family, and every asset tied to the Ward name just became a target." The words hung there, heavy and real. Somewhere outside, a car drove past the gates, headlights slicing briefly across the trees before disappearing. Ethan swallowed. "What are you saying?" Emily looked between the brothers. Two identical faces, two lives that had taken violently different roads, now colliding in one room. "I'm saying," she replied, "that whatever your father got you mixed up in, it's about to land on both of you." Lucas smiled slightly, but it wasn't pleasant. "He had no idea," Lucas said softly, eyes still on Ethan. "The worst was yet to come. If this story is already touching you, leave a like. It helps the channel a lot." The study looked out over the dark stretch of ocean, the glass walls making the night feel closer than Ethan liked. He'd always loved that view, clean, endless, predictable. Tonight, it just looked like a void. Emily spread the old document out on the desk beneath a polished brass lamp. Lucas stood a little distance away, one hand in his pocket, watching her with that same unreadable calm. Ethan hovered by the credenza, fingers resting on a decanter he hadn't bothered to pour from. Up close, the will looked real. Yellowed edges, ink that had bled slightly into the fibers of the page. Charles Ward's looping signature at the bottom, neat, practiced, unmistakable. "Where did you get this?" Emily asked again, her voice lower now. "From a clerk in Bratislava," Lucas said, "whose uncle used to work in a small law office that handled, let's say, international concerns for people like Dad and his friends. It was buried in a box that was supposed to be destroyed 15 years ago. "And why wasn't it?" she pressed. "Because people are lazy," Lucas said. "They don't burn what they're told to burn. They move, they change jobs, they forget, and men like Gideon Heir rely on that laziness. They use it until someone like me offers double to go through the ashes." Emily traced a line of text with her eyes. "This version splits the estate," she murmured, 50-50 between both sons, with joint controlling interest in Ward Holdings. No sunset clause, no provision for disappearance. "Exactly," Lucas said. "Before Dad decided I was a liability." Ethan crossed his arms. "Even if it's real, it's superseded by the final will. That's how this works, Lucas. New document cancels the old." "Unless," Emily cut in, "you can prove the new one was signed under duress, or that there was fraud, or that there was intentional concealment of a prior version." Ethan stared at her. "Are you serious? You think he has a case?" Emily lifted her gaze from the page. "I think he has something that could make a judge pause." She nodded at Lucas. "Especially if he walks in with a story about being forced out, threatened, pushed off the board, financially and literally." "It's not just a story," Lucas said. "I have emails, transaction logs, names. Dad thought he could hide everything offshore, but the world changed. People talk now. Systems leak. You'd be amazed what surfaces when you start asking the right questions in the wrong countries." Ethan rubbed his temples. "So what do you want? You show up here, drop this bomb, tell us we might be sitting on illegal structures tied to a ghost consultant, and you think I'm just going to, what, hand you half?" "Money is leverage," Lucas said, "but it's not the only kind. I don't want a check, Ethan. I want access. I want keys." I want to know what's really inside Ward Holdings now, what's attached to my name without my consent. He pointed at the document. And I want this on record, not hidden in a safe, not tucked in some "we'll deal with it later" folder. I want it acknowledged. Emily exhaled slowly. If we introduce this, everything gets messy. Probate gets reopened. The company's structure gets scrutinized. Auditors, regulators, maybe even investigators start digging. If there really are offshore accounts tied to you, she looked at Ethan, they'll find them. And if we don't introduce it, Lucas asked, you think Gideon's people will just stay asleep? As if on cue, the lights flickered. It was brief. Half a second, maybe, but long enough for the room to dip into darkness before the warm glow stabilized again. Ethan's head snapped up. Lucas's eyes went to the ceiling. Emily turned toward the hallway. What was that? Ethan asked. Wind, maybe, Emily said, though her tone didn't match the words. The intercom on the corner of the desk crackled to life, Maria's voice carrying a thin edge of nerves. Mr. Ward, I'm sorry, but the security team says there's an issue with the front cameras. They're offline. Ethan pressed the button. Offline how? They cut out about 10 minutes ago, she replied. We can see the back perimeter, the garage, the interior feeds, but the gate and the road approach are black. The tech says it's probably a glitch, but he's on his way back to recheck the system, just in case. Ethan glanced at Lucas, who was already walking toward the wall of monitors built into a side unit of the study. He tapped the controls, flipping between feeds, the kitchen, the back lawn, the side driveway. Grainy night vision, a slight delay, but everything else was working except the front. 10 minutes, Lucas murmured. Right around the time Maria announced your lawyer. Ethan frowned. You think someone knew Emily was coming? I think someone knew something was happening here tonight, Lucas said, and they wanted to know who drove up your pretty little hill. Emily stepped closer to the screens. Can you pull archived footage? From before the outage? Ethan hit a few keys, then shook his head. Already tried, it's blank. The system jumps from 8:47 to 8:53. Nothing in between. That's not a glitch, Lucas said. That's a wipe. Emily turned to him, color draining slightly from her face. You said you were confident they didn't know you were back. I was, Lucas replied. Looks like I might have overestimated the value of distance. The house suddenly felt too open, too many windows, too much glass. Should we call the police? Ethan asked. And say what? Emily replied. We think someone might have hacked your security feed for 6 minutes. They'll take a report, log it, and forget it. Meanwhile, whoever did it already got what they wanted. Ethan's mind raced. What would they want? Confirmation, Lucas said, that I kept my promise and stayed away, or that I finally broke it and came home. He stepped back from the monitors. His reflection ghosted over the black boxes where the front cameras should have been streaming. 2 identical faces stared back, one tense, one almost amused. This is your life now, Ethan, Lucas said quietly. Your name on paper with people who don't like unanswered questions. You wanted to believe you inherited a clean empire. You didn't. You inherited a debt. Ethan turned away from the screens, heading for the desk drawer where he kept a locked metal case. He pulled it out, keyed in a code, and opened it. Inside lay a sleek handgun, cleaned, legal, registered. Purchased years ago after a break-in at another estate in the neighborhood, never used. Emily watched him with controlled disapproval. You think that's going to help against people who can erase you with a keyboard? I think it's going to help me sleep, Ethan said. Lucas's gaze flicked to the gun, then to Ethan's face. That won't scare them, he said. You know what will? Ethan waited. Noise, Lucas continued. Attention. The one thing men like Gideon Heir hate is losing control of the narrative. If we move first, if we expose what Dad did on our terms, we turn their secret weapon into a liability." Emily shook her head. "Going public with this would be suicidal. Do you have any idea how fast the markets would punish Ward Holdings if there's even a hint of offshore fraud? Stock crashes, clients bail, regulators camp on your lawn." "Maybe," Lucas said, "or maybe we use the threat of exposure the way they used it on us. We don't have to burn the house down. We just have to show we know where the matches are." Ethan looked between them, his lawyer telling him to bury this, to move carefully, to protect the brand. His brother saying to weaponize the truth, to turn the danger back on the people who'd created it. For most of his life, Ethan had been the safe one, the stable twin, the man who chose the least risky path. Now, every option in front of him looked like a cliff. "Everyone thought it was over when Dad died," Lucas said quietly, eyes on the dark ocean beyond the glass. It wasn't. By morning, the house felt like it had a hangover. The Atlantic was calm again, grey-blue under a thin winter sun, but the Ward estate was off balance, staff quieter than usual, doors opening and closing a little too softly, conversations cut short whenever Ethan or Lucas walked by. News didn't travel slowly in a house like this. The staff knew. The missing twin was back, and something about his return made the walls feel thinner. Ethan hadn't slept much. He spent half the night in the study, combing through account lists, ownership charts, anything he could pull from the servers that might hint at the other empire Lucas had described. The more he dug, the more he realized how much he didn't know. There were gaps, not big ones, just thin, blank lines where a subsidiary's ownership trail ended one step too soon, or a holding company appeared in a transaction history without any clear origin. Nothing illegal on its face, nothing he could point to and say, "That's wrong." Just the nagging sense of missing context, like reading a book with every seventh page torn out by 7A. Indeed, he changed into a navy suit and white shirt, tie abandoned on the back of a chair, when Maria knocked on the study door again. "Mr. Ethan," she said, slipping in halfway, face pale. "You need to come to the gate." Ethan straightened. "What happened?" "It's better you see," she said. He followed her down the corridor, past the front foyer, and out to the driveway, the cold morning air biting at his skin. Lucas was already there, standing near the stone pillars that framed the iron gate, hands in the pockets of a dark coat, expression tightly controlled. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Lucas didn't answer immediately. He just nodded toward the right-hand pillar. At first, Ethan didn't see it. The stone looked normal, smooth, light grey, a little damp from overnight condensation. Then he moved closer and saw the faint, precise lines at eye level, carved shallowly into the surface. 3 words: clean, neat, deliberate. "Welcome home, L." Ethan's mouth went dry. "When did this?" "Security shift change found it at 6:30, Lucas said. "It wasn't here at midnight. No alarms, no motion alerts, just words waiting with the sunrise." Ethan turned to Maria. "Who was on duty?" "Carlos and Peter," she said. "They're both inside, waiting to speak with you. They swear they saw nothing. There is nothing on the cameras." "Of course there isn't," Lucas murmured. "Whoever did this knew exactly where the blind spots are." "Could it be a prank?" Ethan asked, grasping for something smaller, safer. "Someone in town who heard you were back. Nobody in town knew," Lucas cut in. "Nobody except your staff, your lawyer, and whoever erased 6 minutes of video last night." He stepped closer to the carved words, tracing the air just above them without touching the stone. "This wasn't done with a pocket knife," he added. "Too clean. Tool marks are too consistent. This was planned." Ethan's heart thudded. L for Lucas. Lucas's jaw flexed. Or L for leverage. A car door shut softly behind them. Emily crossed the gravel in a long coat over her suit, coffee in hand, her eyes already sharp with questions. "I got your message," she said. "Please tell me the welcome home note was metaphorical." Ethan stepped aside so she could see. Her face tightened. "Okay," she said slowly, "so we can safely assume your reappearance is no longer a secret." "We assumed that last night," Lucas replied. "This is just confirmation." Emily took a photo with her phone, then another closer shot. "I'll have a private security firm look at this," she said. "Tool depth, angle, height. Maybe we get something on the way they moved, the time frame, access, but given the missing footage, I'm not optimistic." "Should we call the police?" Ethan asked again. "Yes," Emily said, "but not because they'll fix it, because we need a record that something is escalating. If this ever lands in front of a regulator, prosecutor, or judge, I want a paper trail that shows you were trying to protect the estate, not hide anything." Lucas smiled faintly. "You really think the local PD is ready to dance with people like Gideon?" "I don't care if they're ready," Emily said. "I care that when someone eventually asks, what did Ethan Ward do when his family was threatened, the answer is not nothing." Ethan exhaled, nodding. "Fine. Call them." Emily looked at Lucas. "You'll need to be careful what you say. You can't mention offshore accounts, shadow consultants, or past agreements you can't substantiate without incriminating yourself or Ethan." "I know how to talk to people with badges," Lucas said. "I've had practice." Something about the way he said it made Ethan's stomach twist. They walked back toward the house as Maria went to prepare for the officer's arrival. On the front steps, Ethan turned to Lucas. "Why just you?" he asked. "Why L? If this is about the family, about Dad, why not my name?" "Because you're the one they still own," Lucas said quietly. "On paper, in contracts, in obligations. You're not a message, you're an asset." He paused, then added, "I'm the problem." Inside, the kitchen hummed with low, nervous energy. A televised news channel played on mute above the counter, scrolling headlines about markets and politics and things that suddenly felt very far away. Emily took a call in the corner, speaking low into her phone. Lucas poured himself coffee like he did this every morning. Ethan stared at the screen without seeing it. His phone buzzed on the island. Unknown number, just a city and state under it. New York, NY. He almost ignored it. Then something in his gut told him not to. "Ward," he answered, stepping away from the others. There was a pause, a hint of ambient office noise, distant voices, the faint clack of a keyboard. Then a man's voice came through, smooth, mid-range, the kind of voice used to being listened to. "Good morning, Ethan," the caller said. "You don't know me, but I know your father's work very well." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "Let's say I'm a friend of the family," the man replied. "An old friend of Charles's. I heard there's been a change in your household." Ethan's eyes flicked to Lucas, who was leaning against the counter, sipping his coffee, watching him. Emily noticed Ethan's face and straightened. "I don't know what you're talking about," Ethan said, a soft chuckle. "I think you do. Your brother has come home. I'm calling to congratulate you. Families should stay together, don't you think?" Every instinct screamed. Gideon, Ethan thought. It had to be. Or someone so close to him that the difference didn't matter. "What do you want?" Ethan asked. "Such a sharp question," the man said. "Your father always preferred to ease his way into things. Unfortunately, we're past that now." There was a brief rustle of paper on the other end. When the man spoke again, his tone had shifted, cooler, more precise. "I want to reassure you," he said. "The structures your father put in place remain intact. The obligations remain unchanged. And despite your brother's theatrical reappearance, nothing needs to get messy as long as everyone plays their role." Ethan felt cold. "I don't have a role." "Oh, but you do," the man replied, On many documents, in many jurisdictions. Some of them you haven't seen, but they exist nonetheless. And men in my position are very sensitive about signatures. Ethan swallowed. If you're looking for Lucas, talk to him. I already have, the man said. 10 years ago. He was very clear about his boundaries. I respected them. I let him go. But seeing him back in that house, near that company, well, it changes the calculus. Old arrangements begin to look tempting again. The room seemed to narrow around Ethan. If you touch him, the man laughed, genuinely amused this time. You're protective. That's good. You should be. Here's my concern, Ethan. Your brother spent a decade learning how to break things quietly. Systems, deals, people's illusions. If he decides to turn that experience on my interests, I'll have to respond. And I respond thoroughly. Ethan forced his voice not to shake. What are you asking for? A simple courtesy, the man said. Convince your brother to enjoy his inheritance and leave the past where it belongs. I don't care if he takes half your money, half your houses, half your company. That's family business. But if he starts moving towards certain accounts, certain structures, if he starts pulling threads, eventually something will unravel. And when it does, the people who get strangled first are never the ones who started pulling. Silence stretched. On the muted TV screen, stock tickers slid by in green and red. You think you're untouchable, Ethan said quietly. No, the man replied. I think I'm practical. You, on the other hand, are running out of practical options. The call clicked off. Ethan stood there, phone still at his ear, feeling his pulse pound behind his eyes. Who was that? Emily asked, already moving toward him. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Someone who says he was Dad's friend. Lucas set his mug down, eyes narrowed. What did he say? Ethan looked between them, the twin who'd disappeared into the dark and come back sharper, and the lawyer who'd hitched her career to a family name now laced with invisible wires. He said, Ethan replied, that as long as you leave the past alone, nobody has to get hurt. Lucas's smile was thin and dangerous. Then he doesn't know me as well as he thinks. Emily closed her eyes briefly, like she was bracing herself for a wave. He had no idea, the narrator might have said. The worst was yet to come. By noon, the sky over Western Harbor had turned a hard, bright blue, the kind that made the ocean look almost harmless. Inside the Ward estate, nothing felt harmless at all. Ethan stood at the head of the conference table in the smaller boardroom, a glass-walled room overlooking the cliffs, usually reserved for quiet investment meetings. Today, it was just the three of them, Ethan, Lucas, and Emily. No staff, no outside advisors, just the people who now knew the truth, or at least enough of it to be dangerous. The words from the phone call still rang in Ethan's ears. Families should stay together. You're running out of practical options. He planted his hands on the table to steady himself. We have to assume that was Gideon, he said, or someone very close to him. Lucas sat back in his chair, one ankle resting over his knee, looking maddeningly composed. It was him, he said. He has a very specific way of reminding you he knows more than you think. Emily leaned forward. What does he do when people tell him no? Lucas's gaze went to the window. Depends how useful they are, he said. And how noisy. Silence settled, heavy and sharp. Ethan exhaled. Okay, let's lay it out. Option 1. I talk you into backing off. You take whatever you can get quietly, cash, equity, whatever, and disappear again. You leave the accounts, the shadows, Gideon's people alone. We hope they're satisfied and move on. That's not going to happen, Lucas said immediately. I know, Ethan snapped. I'm just saying it out loud so we all hear how it sounds. Emily crossed her arms. Option 2, she said. You both do nothing. You pretend none of this exists. You ignore the carved messages, the phone calls, the offshore structures. You keep running Ward Holdings like a legitimate empire and pray the dark side keeps to itself." Lucas laughed once, humorless. "That's not an option. That's denial." "And option 3?" Ethan asked. Emily's jaw tightened. "You go to war," she said. "You bring in the feds. You hand them everything, Lucas's documents, the old will, whatever you can pull from those hidden accounts. You admit there were structures you didn't understand, that your father used your name without your full knowledge. You cooperate, fully, and they tear us apart," Ethan said. "Regulators, prosecutors, the press, we'd be finished." "Maybe," Emily said, "or maybe you survive smaller, but clean, alive instead of rich, free instead of owned." Lucas was watching her closely now. "You're too comfortable saying that," he said. "Like you've thought about it before." Emily hesitated just a fraction of a second. "Because I have," she said. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a navy blue folder, the kind she used for high-level case files. When she opened it, Ethan saw a neat stack of printed emails, memos, and a short letter bearing a federal seal at the top. "6 months ago," Emily said quietly, "I started seeing patterns, small inconsistencies in your audited reports, tiny gaps in ownership trails, things that didn't make sense unless someone was intentionally hiding pieces from you." Ethan stared at her. "You never said anything." "Because I didn't have proof," she said. "Just instincts. And you were comfortable. Profitable. You wanted to believe the house was spotless." Her eyes softened. "And I wanted to believe for you." She slid the letter across the table. "So instead of accusing you, I did something else. I requested a confidential meeting with a financial crimes task force in New York. I presented hypotheticals, structures that looked very much like Ward Holdings without using the name. They agreed to open a sealed, preliminary file. No investigation, not yet. Just a door, in case I ever needed to walk through it." Ethan felt the room tilt. "You went to the government behind my back. I went to them to protect you before you ever knew you needed protecting," she said. "If Gideon's network collapses and they decide they want a Ward as a trophy, I wanted to be able to say, 'We came to you first. We cooperated. We tried to clean this before it exploded.'" Lucas's eyes flashed with something like respect. "You really are smarter than you look," he said. She shot him a look. "Flattery from a man who used to smuggle ghost corporations across jurisdictions doesn't mean much." He smiled faintly. "I never had to smuggle them. People brought them to me." Ethan picked up. The language was cautious, formal, couched in layers of protection, but the meaning was clear. If Ward Holdings walked in with real evidence and a willingness to cooperate, someone in a federal building was ready to listen. "So, option 4, Emily said softly. "We stop pretending we're in control of this and go tell the truth before Gideon forces his version of it on us." Ethan stared at the seal on the page. Ward men did not walk into government buildings asking for help. Charles had taught his sons that the system was something you managed from a distance, not something you stepped into willingly. "You do this," Lucas said. "You don't get to choose which parts of the story stay buried." "I know," Ethan said. "You might lose everything." "I know." Lucas watched him a long time, searching his twin's face for something. "You really willing to do that?" he asked. "To burn down the empire Dad built." Ethan's voice was hoarse when he answered. "If the choice is between living in his shadow and dying in his mess, then yeah," he said, "I'd rather start over." Something shifted behind Lucas's eyes, something fragile and dangerous at the same time. "You really didn't know," Lucas murmured. "He kept you that clean." Ethan almost laughed. "You think I wanted to be clean?" he asked. "Dad trusted you with the risk, with the adrenaline, the edge. He trusted me with balance sheets." He swallowed. I used to be jealous of you." Lucas blinked, as if that possibility had never occurred to him. "He told me once," Ethan continued, "that you were the son who understood how the world really worked, that some deals needed a different kind of brain. I thought he was just insulting me. I didn't realize he was dragging you into something that could get you killed." The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of years they hadn't shared, choices made in rooms Ethan had never entered. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, the words catching, "for not finding you, for not pushing harder, for thinking you just chose to leave." Lucas looked away, jaw clenched. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for not giving you a chance to prove you would have chosen me over him." The room held its breath. Emily slid another sheet toward them, this one a blank page with a heading at the top and lines waiting to be filled. "If we do this," she said, "we plan it carefully. Lucas, you document everything you know, accounts, names, transfers, threats. Ethan, you authorize a forensic team to go through Ward Holdings' entire structure. We gather the evidence before Gideon realizes we're moving. Then we go to New York, together." "And in the meantime?" Ethan asked. "In the meantime," Lucas said slowly, "we give Gideon something else to look at." They both turned to him. "What do you have in mind?" Emily asked warily. Lucas's smile was thin. "Men like Gideon hate uncertainty. They hate loose ends. They especially hate the idea that someone might be smarter than them, so we show him noise. We bait him into making a move where he thinks he's in control." He leaned forward, tapping the table. "There's a dormant account he used to use. A test account, small flows but important ones. It's been quiet for years. If I wake it up from this IP address, from this house, his people will see it. They'll think I'm trying to get into his world again, that I might be desperate, or reckless, or both." "And then?" Emily asked. "And then he'll send someone," Lucas said. "Not himself, obviously, but a lieutenant. Someone important enough to talk, arrogant enough to feel safe. We arrange the meeting somewhere I choose, somewhere with exits and cameras he doesn't control. Somewhere," Emily said slowly, "we can invite federal agents to be waiting." Lucas nodded once. "You give your friends in New York a gift, a live, talking piece of Gideon's operation. In exchange, they get context and we get space." Ethan stared at him. "You're willing to use yourself as bait?" Lucas's mouth twisted. "I've been their bait for 10 years, he said. "Might as well make it count." Emily rubbed her forehead. "You realize this could go very, very wrong." "Welcome to my last decade," Lucas replied. The plan moved faster than Ethan expected. Within hours, Lucas had accessed the dormant account from a secure terminal in the study, moving a tiny amount, just enough to leave a fingerprint. Emily sent a carefully worded message to her contact in New York, attaching a redacted version of Lucas's notes. 2 hours later, her phone buzzed with a reply, a date, a time, a meeting point, and a simple instruction. "We'll be there. Wear a wire." The meeting was set for the next night at an old private airstrip 30 miles inland, a place Ward Holdings had once considered buying for development, then abandoned when regulations got messy. It was quiet now, the kind of place no one noticed unless they were looking for it. When the night came, Ethan drove. Lucas sat in the passenger seat, dressed in dark clothes, an earpiece barely visible beneath his hair. Emily was in the back, her eyes fixed on the small monitoring device in her lap. Somewhere nearby, in unmarked cars they couldn't see, federal agents were listening. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said for the 10th time. Lucas smirked. "One of us has to know how to talk to people like this," he said. "You'd start quoting compliance codes." Emily looked up. "Remember the plan," she reminded him. "You keep him talking. You acknowledge nothing specific. If he starts pushing you to reopen old channels, you ask questions. You stall. Let him brag. Men like this love to brag." Lucas nodded once, then opened the door when they reached the edge of the cracked asphalt. A single hangar stood ahead, half lit, its metal sides catching the moonlight. A black sedan already waited near the entrance. Ethan's chest tightened. "Lucas, I'll be fine," Lucas said. "I've walked into worse rooms with less backup." He stepped out, closing the door with a soft thud, and walked toward the hangar like he belonged to the night. Ethan watched him go, an identical silhouette moving further away. Inside the car, the monitoring device crackled softly, then picked up footsteps, the creak of a door, voices echoing in the hollow space. A new voice joined Lucas's, smooth, confident, not the man from the phone, but cut from the same cloth. "You really should have stayed gone," the stranger said. "Some ghosts don't get second chances." Lucas's reply was calm, almost bored. "And some men mistake patience for weakness." The conversation unfolded like a slow chess match. The man asked questions. Lucas gave half answers. Names were hinted at, not spoken. Locations referenced in codes and callbacks. Years of fear condensed into 30 minutes of careful verbal dancing. Then the man slipped. "And after everything Gideon did for your father," he said, "this is how you repay him, by running to his enemies the second you get nervous." Emily's eyes flicked up. "There it is," her expression said. "Confirmation, a link, a name." Sirens never sounded. No dramatic shouting. Just a sudden shift in the tone of voices in the hangar, the click of multiple boots on concrete, the sharp, authoritative commands of people who had done this many times before. "Hands where we can see them. Do not move! Federal agents!" Ethan gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. Minutes later, Lucas emerged, hands empty, flanked by two agents who looked more like accountants than cops. He was pale under the hangar lights, but his eyes were bright. The man who'd met him was face down on the asphalt, being cuffed and read his rights. Somewhere behind them, phones were already ringing in cities Ethan had never seen. One piece of Gideon's network had just been dragged into the light. Over the next weeks, everything changed. Emily flew to New York with both brothers, walking them into a secure federal building where they sat for hours in windowless rooms, telling the story Charles Ward had tried to keep buried. There were negotiations, hard questions, anger, tears Ethan hadn't known he still had. They didn't walk out free. Parts of the Ward fortune were seized, rerouted, restructured. Subpoenas hit like hail. There were headlines, sharp, unforgiving ones. The Ward name suddenly tied to words like offshore and investigation and legacy under fire. But there were other headlines too. Words like cooperation, key witnesses, family breaks silence. The markets punished the company, then stabilized when it became clear Ethan and Lucas were, in many ways, the ones who'd lit the fuse on the truth. Gideon did not vanish overnight. Men like him rarely did. But his world grew smaller. Accounts froze, partners turned. The man from the airstrip cut a deal, and names that had once been whispered in back rooms started showing up in indictments. Back in Western Harbor, months later, the Ward estate looked almost the same from the outside. Inside, it had shifted in ways that mattered more. The carved words on the gate were gone, the stone patched and cleaned. Cameras had been replaced, updated, doubled. The staff moved with a new kind of alert professionalism. Maria still insisted on blessing the foyer with holy water on the 1st of every month. In Charles Ward's old sitting room, the twins stood side by side before the fireplace, watching flames lick at fresh logs. "You know they're going to put you on some list," Ethan said. "Whistleblowers, key cooperators, people who brought down a piece of the machine." Lucas shrugged. "I've been on worse lists." "You're not afraid?" Ethan asked. Lucas took a sip of his drink. Of Gideon, he said. Less than I used to be. Men who lose their empire get emotional. Emotional men make mistakes. And of me? Ethan asked quietly. Lucas looked at him. I was never afraid of you, he said, just of who you might choose to be when you finally saw what Dad really built. Ethan swallowed. And who is that? Lucas studied his twin's face. The same light beard, the same eyes, a little older now, a little more haunted, but clearer too. A man who chose to burn it down, Lucas said. That's more than I ever thought you'd do. Ethan glanced at the photo on the mantel. The three of them years ago, Charles in the middle, a hand on each son's shoulder. For the first time, the picture didn't look like a promise. It looked like a warning. Emily says we'll rebuild, Ethan said. Smaller, stricter, boring maybe. Boring is good, Lucas replied. Boring doesn't get people killed. They stood in silence for a moment, the fire popping softly. There's something you should know, Ethan said, reaching into his jacket. About Dad. He pulled out a thin, worn envelope, the kind that didn't look like much but felt heavier than it should. One of the agents found a safety deposit box in his name, Ethan said. Old forgotten. It had some bearer bonds, a key, and this. He handed the letter to Lucas. Lucas hesitated, then opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Charles Ward's hard, slanted script. Lucas read in silence. Ethan watched his brother's face shift. Anger, disbelief, something that hurt to see. When Lucas reached the middle of the page, his jaw clenched. When he reached the end, his hand shook just once. What does it say? Ethan asked. Lucas folded the letter carefully, as if afraid it might disintegrate. When he spoke, his voice was rough. He knew, Lucas said. He knew Gideon would come for one of us. And he chose me, said I was built for the shadows, said you were built for daylight. He swallowed. He thought he was protecting you, that sacrificing one son to the dark would save the other. Ethan felt sick. That's not protection. That's calculation. That's who he was, Lucas said. A man who turned everything into risk and reward, even his family. He slid the letter back into the envelope and set it on the mantel beneath their father's smiling face. But he underestimated something, Lucas added. What? Me, Lucas said simply. He thought throwing me to Gideon would break me or bind me. He never considered I might come back with enough leverage to break him instead. Ethan looked at his brother, at the scars you could see and the ones you couldn't. You're more dangerous than he ever realized, Ethan said. A faint smile tugged at Lucas's mouth. That's the idea. Ethan's phone buzzed on the coffee table, a news alert. He glanced at it. Another headline about a major breakthrough in the federal case. Unnamed sources citing cooperating witnesses with deep internal knowledge. He silenced it and looked back at Lucas. So, he said, what now? Now, Lucas said, we build something that doesn't need shadows to stand. And if the shadows come looking again? Lucas's eyes hardened just slightly. Then they'll find out, he said, that the brother who came back richer also came back a lot more dangerous, and this time he's not running. Later that night, Ethan stood alone on the balcony outside his bedroom, the ocean whispering below. The wind cut cold through his shirt, but he stayed, breathing in the salt-touched air. His phone buzzed once in his hand, unknown number, no city, no state, just a message. Welcome back, Elle. Debt cleared, favor returned. Ethan stared at it, unease prickling under his skin. Slowly, he turned toward the sliding door. Lucas was there, leaning in the doorway, hands in his pockets, as if he'd been expecting this moment. You know? Ethan asked, lifting the phone. I guessed, Lucas said. Gideon doesn't like unpaid debts. I did him a favor once, years ago. Getting his lieutenant arrested was payment. We're square. "And this?" Ethan asked, holding up the message. "What does this mean?" Lucas's expression was unreadable in the dim light. "It means he's not coming for us," he said. "Not directly. Not now. Men like him don't retire. They just adjust, distance themselves from the parts that got messy." Ethan stepped closer. "And it also means," he said slowly, "that you still understand his language." Lucas didn't deny it. "I told you," Lucas said quietly. "There are other ways to get rich. Faster ways, riskier ways. I learned them. I'm not unlearning them. I'm just choosing where I point them now." "And where is that?" Ethan asked. Lucas looked past him, out at the dark line of the horizon, as if he could see the future mapped in waves. "Here," he said. "At us. At whatever we build next. At making sure nobody ever uses our name as a weapon again." He glanced back at Ethan, a spark of something almost light in his eyes. "You wanted to know who came back after 10 years, Lucas said. "The answer is someone who understands how dangerous he can be, and is finally on your side." For the first time in a long time, Ethan believed him. Inside, the fire in Charles Ward's old sitting room burned steadily. Outside, the ocean kept moving, indifferent and endless. Somewhere between the two brothers, mirrors who'd lived different lives, began, slowly, to build something new. If you're enjoying these stories, subscribe to the channel and follow the next videos, and tell us in the comments what this story meant to you.